Welcome to Healing Minds, Stories of Resiliency and Recovery, a conversation held at the intersection of substance abuse, mental health, and everyday living. Your hosts, Mark Regala and Justin Wolf, bring both professional expertise and personal understanding to the table. So welcome to the conversation. Let's dive in.
Hi, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Healing Minds, Stories of Resiliency and Recovery. My name is Justin Wolf, and I'm joined by my co-host, Mark Regala. Mark, how are you doing this evening?
Doing good. Beginning of summer, hot out, long days. You light out early when you go to the gym, light out late when you go to bed. That's actually a good thing.
Right. No, especially for your summer bronze that we can see you.
Trying.
Yeah.
I don't get too much time out there, but a little bit of time here and there. Got a little farmer's tan going here, so you can see it right there. See?
Okay. Showing the crowd some skin. Love it.
Oh yeah,
Love it.
exactly.
That's what the audience comes back for.
Oh yeah, I'm sure.
I just saw our guest count go up. No, but you're right. Like with summer, kind of being outside, the ability to kind of just like get outside our four walls of our house and connect and participate and see our friends and kind of be out there with family, which kind of leads into today's topic in the episode of really addressing and repairing relationships and relationship ruptures that have occurred as a result of substance use, addiction, or mental illness, right? Because there's this nice saying, right, where it's like, hey, like we don't have relationships, we take hostages. And there's a lot of things that occur and transpire during the active use that really damages the relationship. And when you kind of look at the actions, the behaviors, the lies, the deceit, there was a lot of projecting it and blaming the other person for why we made the choices that we made, or justifying the reasons for why certain actions were engaged in or weren't engaged in. And so that's where there's so critical for recovery. Because I feel like this is like one of the most important things is learning really to have healthy relationships with other people as well as with ourselves. And a lot of that starts with repairing the damage that's been done, which means that we're owning our stuff. And we're no longer justifying, rationalizing, or projecting our reasons for why we acted the way we acted onto that person, and take accountability and ownership of the choices and the decisions that we made. And, when we talk about the disease of addiction combined with mental illness, it just ravages relationships. And I mean, I'm just wondering, Mark, for you, if you want to kind of share maybe the impact that your use in mental illness had on relationships.
Well, I mean, from a dual diagnosis perspective with the mental health and then the addiction and alcohol side of things. I mean, again, I had an ignorance when it came to mental health. So, I mean, I knew I had feelings on the inside. I knew I was getting depressive thoughts. But, I didn't know, that I had PTSD. I didn't know that I had general anxiety disorder. I mean, I didn't even know I was having panic attacks, even though I had all the signs of a panic attack. I just thought there was something wrong with me, as we talked about before. So, I mean, that all happened when I was in the weeds of my addiction, okay, with prescribed medication, prescription pain pills, and alcoholism. And I didn't understand why I was going down this path, of addiction. But I mean, as far as relationships go, I mean, the chaos that created as a result of my lack of knowledge and not understanding what was going on with me was, I mean, my whole life was basically turned upside down. I mean, I lost my relationship with my employer. I had strained relationships with work colleagues. I think it's pretty well documented. I went through a divorce after 25 years of marriage, strained relationships with my children, and they're still strained to this day. It's been roughly, almost 6 years since really I've had a a decent conversation with them. I've become a grandfather. Since then, I've never met my grandkids. Uh, Obviously, strained relationships with my parents because when I was going through my divorce, I was using pretty heavily. I was living under their roofs. I mean, I subjected them to some of that toxic behavior. Um, my sister and my nephews. I mean, pretty much every single person in my life was affected by my behavior. So, absolutely, it created chaos and created stress and strain in those relationships for sure.
Yeah, and I think you kind of just like highlight like, hey, like everybody that you were connected to, that you had a relationship, was impacted by this. And
Yeah,
just like highlighting a lot of like those major themes that tend to come up when we're talking about like, hey, I'm trying to keep this alive over here. I'm trying to like make sure like nobody discovers what it is that I'm doing over here in terms of like my active addiction. And when I'm covering this up and I'm kind of making up these lies and trying to remember who I told the lies to and what was the story I gave for why I disappeared or why money is missing, like what's the justification here, so I can make sure that maybe I need to write this down so I don't forget, right? Because
yeah,
it's like a game of smoke and mirrors is the way that guy always saw it. It's like, hey, I tell you I'm doing this over here, but in reality I'm over here doing whatever I please. And as long as you don't find out about what's going on over here and you believe this over here, like we're good. But once, you pull the curtain back and you're like, this isn't good. This isn't what you were telling me. Trust goes right out the door. And I know one of those things about trust is that, you can earn trust with another person that you're close with pretty quickly. But once you lose trust,
hard to get
it
back.
is exactly.
Hard to get back.
And so that's one of those biggest things where it's like you kind of look at everything goes into like that losing trust and just really like the emotional impact that when you break somebody close to you, their trust, that leaves a scar. And people
Yeah,
don't forget that,
yeah,
right? It's like I hear it a lot just historically where it's like, hey, like I've been sober like 3 days. Can't they just get over it already? Like, I don't understand what the big deal is now. And I'm sure in the work you see that come up too, where it's like, I want what I want when I want it, and I want it now.
yeah. I mean, it's a society. We want instant gratification, and it just doesn't work that way. It's a slow, steady process. I mean, recovery is a slow, steady process.
Mm-hmm.
Understanding your mental health diagnosis and sharpening your coping skills is a slow, steady process. And redeeming and rebuilding those relationships is certainly a slow, steady process. And sometimes redeeming and rebuilding those relationships might be the slowest of all,
Right.
quite frankly.
And I think that's the hardest part to accept is saying like, hey, because I want, like, we all want it right now, but it's also saying like, hey, this is something that's not on my timeline. I'm showing that I care about this other person enough and I respect their autonomy to kind of say, you know what, this is really on you. You're going to make that decision and you're going to choose when you're feeling safe enough with me. Because some of these things that happen makes people kind of turn, like, do a side glance, be like, who are you? I don't even know you. So,
And I'm sure that that was the case with me. I mean, people that knew me, I was probably the last person that they thought would go down this path, and the last person that was struggling, with the disease of addiction alcohol. I mean, I hid it for a long time, and I think the reason why we lie
mhm.
is driven by a lot of that shame and guilt. Okay, because you're wondering, well, how the hell is this happening to me? How did I get to this spot? How am I, getting to the point where I'm spending this amount of money on pills from the street? When it started so innocently with a doctor prescribing prescription pain pills for a legitimate neck and back issue. But it happens, and it happens a lot more quick or a lot quicker than what people think. And once you're in it, it is very difficult to get out of it, and you find yourself telling these lies because you feel so guilty on the inside because you're doing wrong.
Yeah.
I mean, you know that you're doing wrong, but at the same time, your brain is telling you to drink or or do pills or whatever it might be. And it's just that mental obsession, that form of self-medication, because you haven't taken the time to work on those feelings on the inside and be able to cope with what's going on inside of you. I mean, like I said, what's going on inside of you is pretty much like a cancer, and if you don't address that, I mean, it's going to fester, it's going to metastasize, it's going to grow. And typically, at least with my case, it grew in the form of addiction, and it grew quick, and it grew pretty large fairly quickly.
Right, because you talk about that emotional pain. That is something that's just constantly like gnawing at you.
Yeah.
And it's one of those things like, hey, like our mind says, get rid of this. This is uncomfortable. I don't like this. And then you have shame kind of there, which just embodies us, where it's like, I'm unworthy. I'm not deserving of this. I'm no good. People will be better off without me. I think everybody will be happier. And it just kind of feeds into that, where it's like, then the way that we start interacting with people and engaging with them pushes them away.
Yes.
And creates the very thing that we actually really fear, is that everybody's going to leave me. But yet my choices, my actions are the very thing that's doing that. And that can be a big thing to kind of like swallow and accept and own, because that means, hey, I actually got some flaws.
Not perfect, that's for sure. Even though we want to be perfect, it's damn near impossible to be a perfect human being, right? So
right.
I mean, yeah, we have flaws. Yeah, we make bad decisions, but it's about moving forward, putting corrective actions into place, making right decisions moving forward, always doing the next right thing, and trying to mend those relationships as best as you possibly can. And I think it's important to understand, Justin, that no matter how much work you do, no matter how hard you work to get into recovery, okay, and live a life of sobriety and get your mental health in check. I mean, because I worked hard to get to where I'm at today. There's just some people that are never going to get over the pain that you caused. Okay, that's just going to happen. And it's, in some instances, those relationships are permanently strained. And in some instances, maybe those relationships will come back years and years down the road. But it's not instant gratification. It's not instantly. And that's what people need to understand. But at the same time, okay, because you still feel that pain on the inside because those relationships are strained. Don't think, the demons of, maybe I should drink, maybe I should do this, whatever, creep in your head. I mean, it's going to creep in your head because now you're feeling some pain because you miss your kids or you haven't met your grandkids or whatever it might be.
Right.
But you have to rely on self-talk and realize, what good is it going to do? Okay. I mean, yes, they haven't accepted anything yet. Okay. But if I go backwards, I'm getting further away from them to accept me as far as the new man that I am now. I just have to keep moving forward. I just have to keep getting better. I just have to keep working on my recovery, be the best version of me, and have faith that sooner or later they're going to come around. And that's what I have on the inside of me. I got faith that eventually people that are near and dear to my heart that haven't accepted me and my men's, they're going to come around sooner or later.
Right, because they're going to see that this just isn't an act. Like, this is genuinely who you are now, and leading and living a completely different life than you did during the chaos that was your world at that time.
Even a completely different life prior to the chaos.
Yeah.
Because I've said this before, I look at myself where I'm at now, even pre-addiction, and I'll take the person that I'm at now all day. I mean, I really would. I'm a much better human being as a result of going through the storm that I went through. And I think a lot of people are shocked by the metamorphosis. They're surprised by the metamorphosis. And in some instances, intimidated, by the changes, because I am just not the same person. From the subject matter that we talk about, to the way that I live my life, to the places that I meet them at. I'm not the same person. It's been a complete pendulum shift. And some people are shocked by it.
Definitely. I mean, just as you talk about this, I'm just like wondering, like one of the common things I hear when kind of up to our old stuff and kind of, living that life, is that I hear like partners or significant others go, "Hey, you're not emotionally available." I just felt like you weren't emotionally there. Felt like you're checked out, like you're distant, like you're here, but emotionally you're in freaking Neptune. Was that something that ever came up for you? Just that emotional distance or being
Well,
emotionally unavailable?
when I was dealing with my mental health or the addiction or both.
Yeah, both.
Yeah, I mean, I wasn't emotionally available at all. I was going to work during the day. Most of the time I went to work sick in the morning and was trying to get my pills because I was going through withdrawals, okay? Um, to just feel better, okay? And then eventually I would get them sometime during the day, usually in the morning. And then I would take enough to get me through the day where I wouldn't be sick, but wouldn't necessarily be affected with my work. And then when I would get home, I couldn't wait to get home because I would lock myself in the friggin' basement and pop pills and basically go to oblivion because I
Right.
just wanted to disconnect from the real world. I mean, I was complete isolation, you know, locked in the basement of my house, living a
Mhm.
life as an oxymoron,
Right.
doing drugs and drinking. And I know we laugh about this, but also at the same time, friggin' lifting weights or watching friggin'
Right.
videos on recovery or hitting a heavy bag.
Right.
Weird, really
Right.
weird,
It's like kind of creating your own cocoon.
unexplainable.
Yeah.
I mean, unexplainable.
And at the same time, it makes perfect sense being at that stage and being at that point in one's life,
You know,
where it's like, hey, just my world and my circle gets tighter and tighter to the point that this is what it's all about. And this is the only thing that's got entry into
you
here.
know. I
And
mean,
everybody else, stay out.
I kind of understand it now.
Yeah.
Now that I'm on the other end, I mean, obviously the lifting and hitting the heavy bag was the anger because I
Mhm.
was so angry at myself for going down this path. I didn't understand how I went down that path. You know, I
Yeah.
understand why I was doing what I was doing because I was so sick on the inside, but I was also physically sick, going through like withdrawals almost every day as well.
Yeah.
And then I also understand the behavior of watching recovery videos or videos about, how to get out of addiction because, and I've said this before, it's like nobody wants to get out of that life more than the addict themselves or more than the alcoholic themselves. They just don't know how to get out of that life, but
Mhm.
they're, but I was on this quest for knowledge, but I mean, it was very bizarre behavior to the point where I think people, when I was with them, felt very uncomfortable being around me because I was intoxicated pretty much
Right.
24/7 with some type of mind altering substance. And just my behavior on a daily basis was just bizarre and very uncomfortable to be around.
Right. I
You
mean,
know,
how do you build trust with another person
can't,
if that's the way that you're showing up, right?
can't, you can't,
Yeah.
you
And
know.
so I know you were kind of already alluding to all this, but there's huge steps that you have taken that other people can really take when it comes to really repairing these ruptures that have happened during the active use. And so I'm just curious, like, what were some of those like early strategies that you really kind of put into practice that really helped you start to rebuild these relationships with loved ones? Because you listed off everybody earlier, and it was
Yeah.
all family and like really close
Yeah.
individuals to you. So where did that start for you, man?
Well, I mean, it wasn't initial. I mean, I'm just being
Yeah,
honest with you because I mean, there were little periods of sobriety. I mean, when my wife filed for divorce, I was almost 6 months sober,
yeah,
out of my first visit to treatment. And then when she filed for divorce, it was just a big time spiral out of control. So, I mean, I had to make a cognizant effort to make sure, that I was living a life of recovery and living a life of sobriety. And part of that was, doing the right things, going to meetings, getting a sponsor, going to support groups, getting active, changing my diet. I mean, finding a new church, all the above. That was important. Okay. Um, from doing that, okay, when you start seeing the changes and you have a stretch of sobriety, um, and you're doing all these things on a daily basis, you do start feeling comfortable in your own skin. Okay, and I think that's important. I mean, you have to you have to feel comfortable with yourself. You have to forgive yourself, right? I mean, you do. That was an important step as well. Um, and then from there, once I felt that I was doing all those things, and I started feeling comfortable in my own skin, I started doing some volunteer work. And with the volunteer work, in a controlled environment where people understood what I was going through, I felt that I could be like brutally honest with them as far as what was going on, my symptoms of mental health early on when I didn't know I had a mental health diagnosis, being brutally honest about the natures of my addiction, how much money I was spending in my addiction, what the quantities were, what I was consuming, and so forth. And I think all that allowed me to heal, and all that allowed me to be brutally honest with my loved ones.
Yeah.
Okay. And that's the one thing that was important, was to be brutally honest with them and explain to them, what happened, kind of how I got there, what I'm doing now. Okay. And really not, if the question was asked, answer the question and answer the question honestly, whether they want to hear the truth or not,
Uh-huh.
they're going to hear the truth.
Yeah.
All that allowed me to, I guess, gain respect because there was very sensitive subject matter
Right.
that was brought up. Um, so I think that they knew, that I was being brutally honest, but they also started seeing the changes in me, and it started a healing process. Now, not everybody accepts that.
Right.
Okay, not everybody accepts that, and certain people accepted it in shorter periods of time, and for other people, it took longer periods of time. And in some instances, and with my kids, they haven't accepted it yet. I mean, it's been 6 years; they have not accepted it yet. You know, but I do know, that doing the right thing, okay, and moving forward and continuing to move forward, I just have faith. Maybe finding that new church has helped me rekindle my relationship with my higher power.
Mhm.
That when the timing is right, they will be reintroduced back into my life. But through that, okay, I find other sources of ways to I guess heal, okay, and that's a lot of the volunteer work that I do.
Mhm.
With working with younger individuals that are dealing with their various addictions, and kind of that they have strained relationships in their household, or maybe they lack a father figure, or whatever it might be, and maybe you can be a male mentor in their lives. I mean, to me, that's helped me heal too. So it's a long answer to your question. It was also a long process to get to where I'm at today,
Definitely.
right?
Definitely. Because I mean, like, one of the, like, that foundation, right? Like, just pure and complete honesty. Like, it's just, you're just going to get it. There's no more stories, no more excuses, justification. It's just like, this is it.
Yeah,
And genuinely kind of like pulling up and be like emotionally vulnerable with people, like when you're being honest. That is one of the quickest ways to build trust with people, because it's like saying, hey, I'm gonna be honest with you, and now you can take this information and do with it as you please.
exactly.
And I'm sharing it with you with the trust that you're not going to throw this back in my face to hurt me
Correct.
with.
Absolutely correct, Daryl. And I mean, I think, boy, I think from being brutally honest, and people not necessarily understanding the natures of my addictions and not understanding what I was going through, and then hear what I was going through, but then also see me where I'm at today, I
Mhm.
think a respect was earned, if that makes
Yeah.
sense. Okay. Where they respect you more. I mean, I've often said this. I feel like I get more respect for overcoming my addictions and living a life of recovery of any professional accomplishment that I've received in my insurance career of 30 years. And I
Yeah.
won a decent amount of awards, a decent amount of trips, and certainly have gotten some accolades in the industry. But I feel like where I'm at right now, the respect that I've earned by living the life that I'm living right now, far exceeds anything that I've gotten professionally.
Definitely. Because it's like, you look at what you've done, it's like not just talking the talk, but you're walking the walk. You're kind of you're being open, you're being honest, and your behavior, it's just all consistent. So it's like backing it up by following through on doing these things day in and day out that are really sending a message. And I think that's one of like those big things when it's like you look at like the past and like, just tearing apart these relationships, not just you, but like just in general, where it's like filled with these lies, these broken promises, these I swear this will never happen again, only to kind of go back out later that night and do the exact same thing.
Yeah.
And
well, I mean, there was some of that. I'm not going to lie. Really, I mean, there was. I mean, early on, I mean, I wasn't a one and done type of guy. I mean, it was a process. I mean, you're talking to a guy that had 2 visits to psychiatric care, 4 visits to alcohol and substance treatment before I got it right. Now, that being said, I made things a lot more difficult than I needed it to be. And a lot of that was driven by, ego and thinking I can do it on my own and not accept help of others and things like that. You just get to the point literally where you just surrender and you're like, there's nothing I can do on my own anymore. I need help and I got to be willing to accept help. And it was when I was willing to accept help is when the healing actually started, and the recovery actually started. But yeah, I mean, as a result of what you just said, and there was some of that, don't think that put, tremendous strains on relationships as well, because it did a lot of strain on a number of relationships as a result of that.
Yeah, because I think that's a big thing. Is kind of learning, hey, now that we've entered this life of recovery, how do we kind of manage those expectations that others now may have for us? And how do we also manage our own expectations of other people too? So I feel like it's 2 sides of the same coin that becomes a really, at times like a slippery slope because people aren't living up to what we expect them to be. And they're not treating us the way that we believe that we deserve to be treated in this moment. At the same time, negating everything that we've done, said.
Exactly.
What's really helpful on your end, man, that's helped you kind of manage the expectations that others have carried for you?
Expectations that others have carried for me. Honestly, I don't think anybody has greater expectations from myself than myself.
Yeah.
I want to be the best version of myself. I think that anybody's expectations of me are probably inferior to my own expectations. So if I can get to where I want to be personally, I feel that I'm going to meet other people's expectations. Okay. And again, it's a process to get to where I'm at right now. I don't want to make it sound like it was easy. I don't want to make it sound like it's something that happened overnight. We're years into this right now. But at the same time, it's also easy to get complacent when you're years into it as well. And we talked about this, complacency that's a slippery slope as well. I just need to focus on being better than the person I was yesterday and every single day continue to grow. And I think if I do that, I will become the best version of myself. And as a result of becoming the best version of myself, I'll meet people's expectations. Yeah. I'm not really worried about that.
Yeah, and I think that's kind of like one of those things where it's like, hey, like you really set a high bar for yourself, and it's really important for you to kind of live up to that and kind of embody and practice and put that out there. And I think one of the big challenges comes up is that sometimes people closest to us too have really high expectations and believe now, hey, you went to treatment, you're sober, you shouldn't have bad days. Like, you shouldn't have cravings or thoughts of using. Why would you? Look at all the pain and suffering you've gone through. And look at all the pain and suffering that others close to you have gone through. And I think that's one of the most difficult kind of expectations that I've seen and I've witnessed and been a part of, that learning and figuring out how do we have these conversations where it's okay to have bad days. Because being able to talk about that is going to be critical to sustaining recovery. Because if we can't talk about that, well, now then what you've pretty much just told me is that I can't be honest. And if I can't be honest, then we're going to quickly slide back into this old pattern, which nobody's going to be happy with. And that's not going to work out well.
Correct. Yeah. No, there's no doubt about it. And, the other thing is, too, is I mean, this is kind of hard to explain, but my disdain towards drugs and alcohol was more on the drug side when I first got sober, specifically opiates,
Mm-hmm.
pain medications, fentanyl patches, all that stuff, because that was all the stuff I was abusing. Again, I never really got into street stuff like heroin or anything like that. So, yeah, I really never had any disdain to that because I don't understand that world. I understand the the prescribed medication world. It's the same damn thing. I mean, let's just be honest. It's the same thing. But living a life of recovery and living a life of service, it's unbelievable how the pendulum has shifted, and my disdain is more towards the alcohol than anything. It's weird. I mean, yes, I struggle with the alcohol, but at the end of the day, what did me in was the friggin' drugs, the opiates, the pain pills. But doing the work that I'm doing and speaking at the hospitals and so forth, there's just so many friggin' people that are struggling with the alcohol side, and they can't beat the alcohol side. I mean, I've said this and I've said this many times. I have never, ever, as long as somebody was willing to accept the help, okay, I've never lost a drug addict that I've worked with. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Now I've had drug addicts die because they didn't accept the help. Okay. But if they worked the program, I've never, but on the alcohol side, all the deaths that I've had, trying to help people it was on the alcohol side. So what's weird is like early in recovery, I wouldn't have a problem like going to a bar and listening to music. Like we had Ted on, a couple podcasts
Yeah.
ago, going to shows and so forth. Now I find myself, I can't even be part of that environment anymore because I got so much disdain as far as what's going on around me and the alcohol and how it's socially acceptable. And I see the demise that it's causing in this country and the people that are struggling with it and so forth. So again, I mean, I don't know if that's growth or that's just a change in mindset or it just has to do with, what I've been subjected to with the work that I'm doing. So, you start talking about relationships, you start talking about boundaries. Unfortunately, it's a sensitive boundary because it might, from the outside looking in, be like, this guy's pretty boring because I don't like being around environments where there's alcohol. I mean, I get it. They serve alcohol at the movie theater and restaurants and things like
Yeah.
that.
Pretty much anywhere
But for the
now.
most but for the most part, you're not seeing people necessarily quote unquote tie one on there. But you go to see a band, okay, people are tying one on, and I get very anxious around those people, and I get sometimes I have to leave,
Yeah.
and sometimes I just don't want to be a part of that. I really don't want to be a part of it, but sometimes I do go just to make some people around me happy, you know. But it's just weird how there's been a complete mind shift and pendulum change in regards to that because I was the guy that was trying to get all my sales reps to go out after work and go to the bar and have a couple drinks. Now
Right.
it's like they don't even recognize that guy. It's like I don't even want to be around it. If I'm going to see somebody I used to drink with, that I might still have a relationship with, we're going to go meet at a Subway for a sandwich or a coffee shop in a controlled environment. Again,
Right.
they would never recognize this guy, if that makes sense.
Definitely. You're not going to go hit up a phone party later to kind of just have a rendezvous with an old friend. No, that's
No,
not happening. So,
not at all.
but one of the things that you really highlight is like, hey, like it's not just like relationship like ruptures with other people. There's been a rupture with ourselves and really kind of listening to what it is that we're saying and how our body's responding in certain environments is saying, you know what, like this just isn't sitting right with me. And if this isn't sitting right with me and this is a place that I don't want to put myself in, then I'm not going to put myself in this environment. And I'm going to set this boundary. I'm going to follow through because I'm worth following through on. And I think that's
Yeah.
part of like the transition, like the flip that happens, that we start become really emotionally invested in the outcome and really caring about, hey, like I want, like you said earlier, like the best version of me to kind of shine through. And in order for that to happen, I need to take these steps and put these precautions in place to kind of make sure that it does.
Correct. It's 100% correct. And it's like, I mean, I guess that's growth,
Yeah.
right? I mean, that's growth, being able to recognize that and have those boundaries and be able to, communicate to people that you just can't be in that environment. Or if we do, we might have to leave early, or or, have a very limited time frame that we're going to be there, we're probably not going to be there till the end of the show or be there at 11 or 12 o'clock at night, because once you can kind of see uh, the alcohol kind of taking control of certain people in the room, I mean, it gives me anxiety. And I
Right.
guess it gives me anxiety because I know the pain that it caused me, but I also see the pain that it's causing other people by going to the hospitals and speaking and seeing people going through detox and things like that, if that makes sense.
Yeah, exactly. Because like you're seeing like the impact it has and
Absolutely.
how this really destroys people's lives and things that
Absolutely.
they've worked for. And never was that the intention when they started using it.
No,
It's
starts out so innocently, right? And so fun.
Mhm.
And then
Exactly.
boom, something a flip switch, or just something just flips in their brain.
Right.
And again, I mean, going to the meetings too. I mean, that's opened up my eyes. I mean, again, I was getting sober, basically pre-COVID. COVID helped me tremendously become very regimented,
Mhm.
you know. And then, I'm still active in meetings now, but
Right.
I mean, the attendance has grown so much, and there's so many different people that you see in so many walks of life that are struggling when you go to these meetings. It's just very eye-opening and very concerning as far as where we're at as a society right now.
Well, you bring up meetings, especially like around the time of COVID and just in general, like the rooms are a fantastic place to really practice on building and applying like those communication skills when it comes to building healthy relationships.
Yeah. And that was weird because, most people that I talked to, COVID was detrimental to them. But for me, COVID helped me.
Yeah.
It just allowed me to focus on myself. It allowed me to focus on, like you said, getting those relationships back. It created some disciplines, as far as what I needed to do from a dietary perspective and exercise perspective. I realized the gyms were closed, but we were meeting in the parking lots with a couple of my buddies, and we were doing exercises in the parking lot, and so forth. I mean, we had the parking spaces, every other parking space, so we can socially distance, but we're all meeting and still working out together, and it just helped create a discipline that carried over to when COVID ended.
That's
You know,
awesome.
and obviously the bars were closed, so it was easy not to go to a bar for me. To be perfectly honest with you, most of the places I was getting my pills from were bars and taverns. So because that was closed, that was taken away from me too. So it's just like, for me, everything lined up like right
Yeah.
before COVID, and that momentum because of COVID just carried over till I got that stretch. And once I got that stretch, and I never wanted to go backwards because I had those disciplines developed,
Yeah.
everything just kind of just snowballed from there and just catapulted me into recovery. And yes, because there was nothing you can do, okay? I mean, you couldn't go out to eat. There was nothing on television. So there was a lot of conversations, between my sister and my parents, and
Yeah.
my nephews were younger back then, friends, you know, uh, and a lot of the damage that was done was being repaired during that time. So, like I said, for me, it helped me tremendously kind of get to where I'm at today. But all that
Definitely.
was happening during that time.
No, and I think like honestly, like I think that's a great way to kind of like capture what we've been talking about today, right? Is like taking the time aside and really spending it and attending to like those relationships with those closest to us who were directly impacted
Yeah,
and really having the ability to prioritize that and sit there and have these open, honest, and emotionally vulnerable conversations that foster growth and start to rebuild and repair that trust that has been impacted by whatever was going on. And you hear often where it's like, I don't even want to hear the whole story. Like I have an idea about what was happening, but I just don't tell me. Like I'm good. Right. So
no, I'm laughing because every now and then something will come up with my mom. And I mean, I was brutally honest and I answered all her questions, but she doesn't know all the stories. And
right.
something came up a couple weeks ago, and she's like, well, did that really happen? Or did you really? Oh, yeah. She's still finding little tidbits out here
Right.
and there, but I feel comfortable talking about it because,
Yeah.
again, that was my past. That was the old me. It's not me now. But at the same time, I mean, that's what I was going through at that particular time, and that's what I was doing at that particular time. There's nothing to hide. I mean, it is what it is at this point.
It is. No, be able to share that, not cover it up and be like, oh no, I'm just gonna deny. But
Now,
Like, no, I didn't get that tattoo. What's that on your neck? Oh, don't worry about that. That's a new weird scar I got somehow.
Haven't got one of those yet, but I want to get a couple of my forearms. I do. Been saying it for a while. I just haven't gotten it done yet. I got a buddy of mine that's willing to do it. You know, he actually, so maybe sometime this summer. That's that. You know, I'm going to be 50. I'm going to be 50 in September, so maybe before my 50th birthday. Actually, he told me he'd give me one for free for my 50th birthday. So
look at that!
Hold up to it.
What a great price!
Yeah, that's why I'm scared to let him do it.
Awesome. Well, Mark, before we kind of wrap up here, anything else that you'd kind of like to throw out there about repairing relationships and addressing those ruptures that have occurred?
I mean, the only thing that I would throw out there is, I'm going to share a story real quick, okay? And it's actually, I had a number of people, okay, that helped me get to where I'm at today. I mean, I can't say I had one sponsor. I probably had 4 or 5 guys, okay, that were my sponsors. And there's 2 gentlemen in particular that I'm thinking of right now, okay, that helped me out tremendously. And they both were well, one is married and the other was married to the same woman. Okay. This one gentleman was in a real bad way when it came to the disease of alcoholism and addiction, and he's a dual diagnosis. And he ended up getting sober. And he had a stretch of probably 13, 14 years of sobriety, but his ex-wife, and his children never accepted his amends. But he focused on getting better, and he focused on striving forward. His ex-wife actually gets married, and she marries a gentleman that, believe it or not, is a drug addict and alcoholic. And she already lost one husband to drug addiction and alcoholism that she left. She didn't know what to do with her second husband. She never accepted her first husband's amends, but reached out to him and said, would you be willing to help my current husband? Because I think he's going to end up dead if we don't get him the help.
Yeah.
He takes the high road. He helps out. Okay. Her current husband helps get him sober. That gentleman actually became my primary sponsor, the guy that he helped get sober. Okay. And as a result, he's got the best relationship with his ex-wife, and he's got the best relationship with his kids. But it took almost 14 years, and it took him doing the right thing. And the right thing is helping a fellow human being, even if that gentleman's married to your ex-wife, right? Okay. And it's the craziest thing now. He's remarried, and he goes on trips with his ex-wife and her current husband, and the current husband and him are like best friends all through the recovery work. You know, I mean, sometimes that's what happens. You know, you have to have faith in a higher power that when the time is right, okay, you will be introduced to people that mean the most to you, whether it's your children or, you know, a cousin, or in this particular case, an ex-wife. You know, you just never know. You know, now he could have very easily during that 14-year period got distressed and got upset and went backwards, but he never did. He never did. And he was very active in the recovery world, and he was helping other people get sober. And then one day his ex-wife came knocking on his door. And as a result, that opened up the door. And he's got the most beautiful relationship with his children now. He's got the most beautiful relationship with his grandkids now. And it all basically transpired as a result of him doing the right thing.
Awesome.
You know, and I think that's important to understand. And that's, you know, hearing that story and knowing where I'm at right now, like with my children, you know, and my grandchildren, because like I said, I've never met my grandkids. That's what inspires me. I know that when the time is right, the stars will line up and those relationships will be rekindled. But I can't go backward. Going backwards is never going to help that.
Right.
You know, you got to keep striving to get better. You got to have high expectations of yourself. You got to keep moving forward, be better than you were yesterday. That's what it comes down to.
Definitely. No. Thank you so much for sharing that story. I think that was wonderful and kind of captured it beautifully there. And so on that note, we're going to call it a show, man. And it's always a pleasure doing this with you. So we are happy everybody is joining and tuning into these discussions. These podcasts will air on the 15th and the 30th of each month, so be sure to tune in. Mark and I are open to suggestions. So if there's any topics or anything you'd like to hear us talk about and cover, again, feel free to visit the website, namidupage.org/podcast, and we will be more than happy to comply with your demands. So
next podcast, I have a nice tan for you now that summer is here.
Perfect.
And you'll be nice and red like a tomato because you told me you don't tan.
Oh yeah, it is my tan, the bright red.
There you
just
go.
Never goes away. The darker the red, the better the tan. So, I mean, I'm looking forward to your farmer's tan and your new tattoo. So, I guess we got
tattoo's going to be a little while. It's not going to be the next podcast. The tan will be there. I don't know when that's going to happen. By September. How about that?
Oh, perfect. All right, we got a plan. All right. Well, everybody, take care. As always, Mark, it's wonderful joining you on these podcasts, man. Until next time.
Yep. Everybody be safe out there and enjoy the summer. Take care.
Thanks for joining us today on Healing Minds, Stories of Resiliency and Recovery. If you're on the journey to find guidance and insights, subscribe now wherever you find your podcasts. Healing Minds, Stories of Resiliency and Recovery is an educational resource, not a substitute for medical or therapeutic advice. The opinions expressed by the hosts and their guests are not necessarily those of NAMI DuPage. Go to namidupage.org/podcast for links to past episodes, show notes, and to submit a question or topic ideas for a future episode. Until next time, be well.